All right, so this will probably be my final video in the full build of the Techno ET48 2.0 e-truggy. I just wanted to spend a little time in this video talking about, once you've got it both mechanically and electrically completed, what you want to do for the basic setup. So if you're copying a setup sheet, what you want to do for that final setup element. And as you can see here, I've got the completed truggy, fully painted body. If we look under the hood, I've got all the electronics in here, the battery. This is race ready vehicle as it stands, and that's what you want to do when you start doing this setup. And ideally, I would plug this car on and power it on so it holds the steering in the neutral position. I'm not going to do that for this video just because the fan on the electronic speed controller makes some noise and I don't want to have that. But I would recommend when you do this to turn the car on and do that basic, have it in the centered position when you do this. So if you look at a setup sheet, here's this one here, and you can see in this suspension section here, there are the first one on it is ride height, and that is actually the first setting that you would need to do to set up a car. To do that, I use this ride height gauge. This one happens to be a Team Lowe's ride height gauge. There's lots of different ones out there. But if you look on this setup, it has a 33 in the front and a 39 in the back. So we would set this for 33. And people do this various ways, and you want to make sure too that your steering is somewhat straight. So if you've turned it on, it should be. But some people will drop these and let them settle and take the ride height. But for me, doing setup, it's all about repeatability. And I find when I drop the car, depending on if I drop it crooked or how high, it changes that. So I just like to push the chassis all the way down to the ground and then let it come up. And then I take the measurement. And for a four-wheel drive e-buggy, e-truggy, you want to take this measurement where the chassis is flat. So right after, as far forward as you can go before it starts the kick-up angle on the chassis, which happens to be like right about in this area here on the chassis. And so you want to stick this thing under there. And right now at 33, I'm slightly low. And so to adjust for that, if you're slightly low, you would adjust these collars a little bit stiffer, and then you would push it down and check again. And you just keep on stiffening this up, doing the same right to left until you can get this ride height gauge. And so now I can get it under there, and then you can check visually, and yeah, this one is right at the proper ride height. And so then the final step is I would take some digital calipers, and I don't actually use the digital part, I just use the measuring part here. But you want to take these and make sure these collars are adjusted the same right to left, and they are, so I'm not going to make any changes to that. And so you would do the same for the front, and then the back. I would take that measurement like basically right where the tower is on the chassis. And so I've already done that, so I'm not going to do the back, but you would set the ride height first. Once you get the ride height set, then the next thing you would look at, if you look on this setup sheet, right next to ride height is camber. And so for this, the camber's at 1 degree, which is really, it's negative 1 degree. And so you would set, this is a camber gauge, you would set this to 1 degree, and then you'd bring it over. This board is like a little bit small, but again, making sure your steering is straight, you'd bring it over here, and you would check against the tire. And this one is not quite at 1 degree, but you do want to make sure you roll the tire as well, because these tires aren't always mounted perfectly square. So you could roll the tire and check it again, and like actually now it looks pretty good the way it is. And so like you can check that in a few different spots on the tire and kind of split the difference in your measurements. And then again, I like to measure these turnbuckle lengths and get them relatively straight. So you would do that and you would adjust the turnbuckles here. For me, it's bringing back to increase the lean towards the car and going forward to push it away from the car. So you'll adjust these, and I've already adjusted mine, so I know they're correct. But you would adjust these to get them correct. And you would do again the same with the rear. Put this camber gauge for this setup sheet, it's -2 on the rear, so you would set this from 1 to 2, and then adjust these turnbuckles as well to get to -2. The next thing on this list is right down in the middle here is toe. And toe is the amount the front tires have steering pushed out. And so that one's a little bit harder to measure. Again, with the steering centered is what I recommend. I'm going to do this without a wall, but ideally this little level that I have here, it would be, you could push your setup board against a wall. And then you want to push both your front tires up against the wall, like so. I'm going to move this over a little bit, but you'll push them up against the wall. And then you can take this camber gauge, and again, right now I have it set at -1, and you use this camber gauge like so, and you sight down the top to get negative, and for this it's -1, and you would use that -1 to get and check this, and you can sight down that way, and you do it on both sides. Again, I'll measure left to right with the calipers to make sure I get those the same. But that's how you can do toe. And then the final setting for basic setup after you copy the setup sheet is right down here. It's called Droop. And Droop is the amount, the distance from the shock standoff down here to the connection to the A-arm. And it, you know, Droop is essentially, it controls how the bump stop of when your shock is, when it's fully extended, when it stops. And so on this setup sheet, Droop is set to 117 millimeters. So you take these calipers and you bring them out to 117, like so. And then you'll actually measure the distance from here to here. Okay, now you can see it. So from there to there, 117. And I've already done this as well. If they're not set properly, then there's this screw down here on your A-arm that uses the 2.0 millimeter, and you're going to adjust this screw in or out to change that length. And there's one on each side. Same with the back. You're going to do the same thing. So you can adjust the back. There's a screw. They call it the Droop screw, which is right back here. And you're going to adjust that and measure the shocks in the back. And for the back, you might have to get access, you might have to take the wing off to get the calipers in there. That's how I did it. You know, you can't quite get these in here with the wing on, so you might have to take the wing off. But I hope it helps you guys out with some basic setup and what these things on these setup sheets mean. And I may create one more about like first impressions of this truck. We'll see, but overall, I hope you find these videos useful, and if you do, please like and subscribe.